you. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Alves, council member for the town of Portola Valley, and this is a focus group for building ADUs. Folks, please mute if you're not speaking. If you've been following the work of the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee, of which I'm a member, you'll recognize this as one of the efforts, one of the initiatives that the committee has actually requested and put forward. We wanted to basically maximize our potential for ADU development around town. And so what we were trying to do here is get input from you, both from people who are have built ADUs. We'd like to hear your experiences, and also people who are considering ADUs. And so again, the goal here is to learn what we can from all of you about what it will take to maximize the ADU contribution to our housing element. And so I'm going to hand this over in a minute to staff who are organizing this. But again, please keep in mind, we're looking for feedback for creative ideas on how to get more ADUs built, and also feedback on what's gone well and what's not gone well when you've gone out to build an ADU. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to hearing from all of you over time. I will hand it over now to staff.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Laura Russell. I'm the Planning and Building Director. There's a couple people that are not muted, so we're just going to go through, and if there's just kind of background noise, we might mute you, but that just means you'll need to unmute yourself when it's time to talk. So thanks everyone for coming this afternoon. We're really excited to hear some feedback from you so we can learn more about how we can maximize ADUs in the community. So the first thing that we're going to do is something that's required from us, and that's to get some demographic information about who's here. And I know we don't love doing that, but it really helps us to track participation. So we're going to put up a survey that has demographic questions. Please go through those and fill it out so that we can keep track of who's been participating. It's just for statistical purposes, like so many surveys that we fill out. So if you'll please take a second and fill that out, we'd really appreciate it.
It disappeared from my screen.
Disappeared from mine also.
Sorry about that. Let me try that one more time.
Okay, it looks good to me. Does everyone have it now? Great, thank you. Okay, we're getting there. Thanks, everyone. This way we can keep track of everyone who's participated across all of our different events. And we can include this in the reporting that we do to the state when we submit our housing element. Okay, so thanks. We've got really great participation on this. So the last few people, if you could fill it out, we appreciate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation by Dylan Parker. He's the town's assistant planner. And then we're going to go into 2 breakout rooms. So Dylan's going to walk you through some of that, and we're going to ask some questions facilitated by Jeremy Dennis, our town manager, and Melvin Gaines, our assistant town manager. We'll be taking notes in the background so that we can compile the information and bring this back to the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee and think about ways that we can improve our ADU process going forward. So we look forward to your input. We're scheduled to go for about an hour in total. We'll get back together in the big group after the breakout rooms so that people can hear what the other group talked about. So we will be asking you to choose between one breakout room or the other, whether you're interested in ADU construction or whether you've already built one. So that is our brief introduction, and I'll turn it over to Dylan now to give you a presentation in general about some ADU regulations to help set the stage for the conversation. So here's Dylan.
All right, thank you, Laura. So for everybody that does not know me, I'm Dylan Parker. I'm the assistant planner with the town. So I generally handle most, if not all, of the ADU applications that come through the planning department. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen real quick and provide some instructions in terms of the breakout rooms. Can everybody see my screen without my notes? Yes? Yes, okay, great. All right, so in order for us to sort you into a room, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the raise hand Zoom feature if you are interested in building either an accessory dwelling unit or an ADU, or perhaps a junior accessory dwelling unit or a junior ADU, or both. So if you're interested in building, go ahead and raise your hand right now. So that way we can go ahead and sort you when we're done with the presentation. If you have built an ADU in the past, you don't have to raise your hand. That'll be to identify you as not being in the first group of the raised hands. So that way we can have you go into the appropriate, the two rooms. So I'm just gonna pause here for a moment for people to raise their hands, etc.
Is it built a ADU in Portola Valley or built an ADU anywhere?
How do you raise your hand?
So I'll answer the first question. It's to build an ADU, hopefully within the town of Portola Valley, but the information that we're providing here is specific to the town. And then the second question is raising your hand. If you look at your screen, I have to stop sharing my screen a bit to kind of walk someone through this. It's going to be on the lower hand and it's going to say reactions, and there should be a like a high five icon. That's how you raise your hand. Were you able to find it?
Yes, thank you, Dylan.
Perfect.
Hey, I have a question. I applied to build an ADU, but was turned down, and I would still like to build it. Would you like me in the which category would you like me to be in? Because I probably have good input on building an ADU.
Dealer's choice. I will leave that decision to you. Whichever one you feel will be a productive conversation for you to have in that instance.
Okay.
And I might ask, I have an existing structure that I'd like to convert to an ADU. So would I fall into the building an ADU because it's not, it isn't counted as an ADU right now?
I would say yes. So if you
Okay.
would like to join that group, you can go ahead and raise your hand if you like.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're all sorted out. Alyssa, is that okay? When I share screen, everything goes to just my presentation.
Oh, no, great on my end. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us tonight to discuss accessory dwelling units. Before we begin the breakout room discussions, I wanted to just discuss some background information about accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. So I've divided this presentation into 3 key topics. The first topic will be about defining an ADU and their benefits. The second will be a brief overview of the state's most recent ADU requirements. And the last topic will briefly overview the town's accessory dwelling unit, or ADU ordinance. So let's start with background and terminology. So what exactly is an accessory dwelling unit, or an ADU? So an ADU is a complete independent living facility for one or more persons. So that's a long-winded way to say an ADU is a separate home for your property that has a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen for one or more people. You may have heard the term second units, in-law units, casitas, or granny flats before. Those are all considered an accessory dwelling unit, or an ADU. In terms of variations of ADUs, ADUs can also come in various forms, such as being a newly constructed detached structure, a conversion of existing floor area in your home, or perhaps a junior accessory dwelling unit or a JADU. So you may be wondering, well, what's the difference between a junior accessory dwelling unit and a regular accessory dwelling unit? So a JADU is a conversion of up to 500 square feet of your existing floor area in your main residence. The components of it is it has a bedroom, a bathroom, but only an efficiency kitchen. And the bathroom is a may have, so it doesn't have to have it, but it may have it, or otherwise it can share with the existing main residence. So when you going to the efficiency kitchen, the best way to think of an efficiency kitchen is just a smaller version of a regular kitchen. So think of a bar sink, under counter or dorm fridge, and counter space just enough for a cooking preparation, and then maybe a microwave or a hot plate. And like I mentioned before, the JADU is not required to have a bathroom. It can, but it is required to also have a separate external entrance. And so now that we've defined what exactly an ADU and a junior ADU is, we'll turn now to what are some benefits of ADU creation within town. So the main benefits are ADUs create easier access to job-rich, high opportunity areas, such as our community. They provide affordable housing for groups such as your family and friends, students, the elderly, in-home healthcare providers, people with disabilities, and other groups not listed here. They also maximize and integrate housing within the existing neighborhoods. And so hopefully that background information was useful. And so now what I'm going to do is turn to the second topic, which are the state ADU requirements. So the state identifies ADUs as a key tool to address housing needs. Beginning in 2016, the state did pass a series of increasingly permissive laws to simplify the ADU process. And these laws have increasingly changed, and they have been effective. They were effective January 2022. This is the most recent series of changes. And these changes, the legislative changes have increased ADU development across many California communities, which is the intent. And so two caveats I always like to express when we're talking about state ADU requirements is that the legislation is very complicated. It internally is inconsistent language-wise, and it does contain large gaps. So it's still a learning process, and some cleanup, housekeeping is expected in the several years coming, we anticipate. And then also, one of the things is if we had not adopted a conforming ordinance, which we did last year, the state law would have controlled, which would have further restricted our ability to provide development standards as we've described in our ordinance. And so just turning to the state ADU requirements in a general sense, the state allows one ADU and one junior ADU for each single family lot. Multifamily ADUs are permitted, and then also junior ADUs, as we've defined them previously, are permitted. The state requires the town to review completed applications within a 60-day timeline. Previously, this was 120 days, so this has been shortened in half. The state also allows for reduced setbacks of 4 feet in side and rear. And then also the state mandates there are 3 categories of ADUs. specifically new construction, which is an ADU 16 feet in height, 800 square feet maximum, and then a 4-foot side and rear setback. The reason I highlighted the can exceed town development standards is this is if, for example, you do not have enough floor area otherwise to build an accessory dwelling unit. So the state requires the town to provide this first category. The second category is simply a conversion. As I mentioned before, it's just converting existing space within your single family building and also accessory structures for just ADUs. JADUs are not allowed for that. And then multifamily ADUs, if we had multifamily buildings within the community, the state allows for those 2 detached ADUs. And so now turning our attention to the town's ADU ordinance, so the third key topic. Before we begin, I just wanted to answer the question of how did we get to today's ADU ordinance? So if we rewind a bit, we can go back to the 2018 and 2019 ADU ordinance updates, where the town council's direction was to increase production. There was extensive discussion about fire safety. There was coordination with the Woodside Fire Protection District's fire marshal. And we developed what's called our fire safety restriction. And so just in general terms, the fire safety restriction discusses if a property has a one-way in and out, if it's accessed by a road that's less than 18 feet wide, property less than 1 acre, in those instances, an ADU would not be allowed.
Dylan, can you clarify, do all of those first 3 conditions need to be met, or is it just one of those conditions?
Great question. If I could go through the presentation, and then if there are any questions for staff, I'd like to save them for the end. Is that okay?
It's fine, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and so just continuing with the ordinance requirements. So the ADUs are allowed in all zoning districts. This is the current ADU ordinance requirements. So turning back into present day, ADUs are allowed in all zoning districts, except that fire safety exception area, as I mentioned. And they are still subject to the geologic safety policies. So geotechnical review, our maps that are established within the community. The numbers that we allow, it's the 1 ADU and the 1 JADU, the junior accessory dwelling unit. They're allowed on almost all properties that are less than 3.5 acres. And then there are 2 ADUs that are allowed on properties 3.5 acres or more. Max sizes, so it depends. So max sizes depend on whether or not the ADU meets town setbacks. So if you're meeting the town setbacks, which are generally a 50-foot front, a 20 side and rear, it would be 1,200 square feet if the property is less than 3.5 acres, 1,500 square feet if the property is 3.5 acres or more. Now, if the property is not meeting setbacks, or in other words, exercising the state's reduced setbacks of 4 feet side and rear, the ADU is limited in size to 850 for a 1-bedroom, and then 1,000 for a 2 or more bedroom unit. And additionally, if an ADU does not meet town setbacks, we do have what's called a fire safety checklist. And so that would need to be completed in order for the application to be submitted to the town. And so just turning briefly to that fire safety checklist, as I mentioned, ADUs that don't comply with the local setbacks complete this checklist. The checklist was developed by both the fire marshal and the planning and building director, which was subsequently approved by town council through resolution. And basically the checklist consists of best practices in the areas of construction methods and materials, defensible space, and vegetation management. All right. So that is the end of staff's presentation. I'm just going to go back to the first slide in terms of our breakout rooms. And then I'm going to stop. Let me minimize. I'm going to have to, let me see what I need to do here. Okay. I'm just going to stop screen sharing for a moment. Laura, did you want me to take any questions from the audience now, or did we want to wait until we do the breakout rooms and then regroup?
We're going to need to wait until we do the breakout rooms and then regroup, because we want to be really thoughtful about everybody's time.
Okay.
But we can stay, if you want to stay at the end, whoever had the question, and we'll do our best to answer a couple questions at the end.
All right, perfect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and then I'm going to just leave the slide up and just pause so we can select ourselves into the rooms. So thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the discussions.
So if you joined the conversation a little bit late, we're asking people to put their hand up in the Zoom feature if you are interested in building an ADU or JADU. We're going to have 2 breakout rooms. So hand up means you are interested in building one, and no hand up means that you have built an ADU in the past and you want to be part of that group. So we're going to separate out into groups. Alyssa's going to do that for us. It's going to take just a couple of minutes for us to separate us. If you're not sure what to do, Alyssa will be able to help you after we've separated out into groups. Thanks, everyone. Okay, it looks like everyone is back. If we could ask Jeremy and then Melvin just to do a brief report out so that each person has a sense of what the other group was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We had a much smaller group than Melvin did. We had a real mix of different times that ADUs were built. We had a few folks who were in the process of building. We had a few folks who recently completed them. And we had a few that came with the property and are unpermitted. So it was a good blend there. We spent most of our time talking about what went well in the process and what was challenging. Since I'm town manager, I'm going to start with people love the staff and working with the staff. Really appreciated that feedback. A lot of comments related to the complexity of the process, and that complexity had different contours to it. Some of it was related to the town's own process and the complexity of our own code and perceived inconsistencies, some actual inconsistencies. There were comments around, in a couple places around septic and the complications related to working with the county in that process. There were some comments related to budgeting. For those who are on a limited budget, it's challenging to be in the process. Also, I would add that just simply building an ADU is incredibly expensive at this point. There were a few comments around other town processy pieces related to where the setback is, removal of heritage trees, and the like. There was one comment that I wanted to point out that ordinance was not considered family friendly for what the applicant was trying to achieve related to the size of the ADU and the number of bedrooms available. I also appreciated the comment that working on an ADU is like an archaeological dig through code. I thought that was well stated. We did talk a little bit about how ADUs are being used by those who've gone through the process. There was one person said that upon completion of the ADU, they would rent, but for the vast majority of the people in our breakout, it sounded like that the ADU was used for family purposes or office purposes. We had 2 people, one who is living in the ADU and the others in the main house is rented out, and one person who plans to have the ADU and their mother living in it. So I just want to share again my appreciation for the candor, helps with our process, and really appreciate the time. Thanks.
Great, and we had some of those similar issues coming up from our group of people who are in a process of trying to build an ADU or a JADU on their property, discussing how septic and other requirements are costly and can increase the cost of building an ADU by more than $100,000. So the idea that building an ADU or a JADU in Portola Valley is expensive for various different reasons. In addition to the cost, we also learned in our group that it's confusing. It's not clear exactly what people are allowed to build and the process that they need to go through to build that. Whether that be an ADU or a JADU, we received a great comment saying that the town should do more to let people know about JADUs in particular, given that we're trying to increase our housing supply. With the commenter made is, that's somewhat a easier method to do that. And they said the town should do more to let people know what it means to build JADUs and how to do them, and that they'd be willing to help out, which is great to hear. There were calls for us to provide more easily accessible, easily understandable information on the process to build, providing easy to understand FAQs or other things on the website would be helpful. And there's also people who discussed the idea of kind of pre-designed ADUs and in a town accepting those and wants to know whether or not, if they were to go through a vendor like Abode Housing or Abode or any of the various other prefabricated ADUs, would the town be willing to accept those? And ultimately, we didn't have tons of time to discuss everything. We didn't get to talk about whether or not people wanted to build an ADU for renting or for living in or for a family member to live in. But ultimately, the big takeaway was that it's not clear what can be done, and they'd like to learn more and to be more concise and clear for the process for applying for ADUs. Oh, and another thing that I forgot to mention, it's difficult to take notes and then be able to summarize those notes, but we also had a question specifically about existing structures that would like to be converted to ADUs and legalized. These might have been structures that are built without permits, but what is the process for legalizing those permits and those structures and converting them to permitted ADUs? And that's it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. In terms of next steps, what we're going to do is compile these comments that we've received from you, and we'll be transmitting them to the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee, and we'll be posting them online as a meeting summary. So we really appreciate, from a staff point of view, we really appreciate your participation. And then I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Yeah, I'll just repeat what Laura said. Thank you for participating. We did actually get a lot of good feedback from our group. I realized it was probably not enough time and we were perhaps oversubscribed. Apologize for that. We do want to respect everyone's time. And again, thank you for your feedback, participating, and we will we'll do our best to sort of incorporate this feedback and chase down some and try to make this process simpler for one and more understandable. We do understand that it's confusing. It's confusing for me, and I've been sort of watching it for several years. So again, thank you, and good night.